Okay, so I know that you guys do a yearly review of policies, but it hasn't quite been a year. So tell me the decision um, to bump up the review. Why was that made, and why are we doing it now?
Well, this morning we had a meeting, a Zoom meeting with all of the chiefs, the sheriff, state attorney for Pinellas County. It was our regular monthly meeting that's normally scheduled, and we had a conversation during that meeting that it would behoove all of us to make sure that we are reviewing policies, as there is, you know, you're well aware, there is attention being placed on police department policies, and particularly the use of force policies. So I thought now would be a good time to go ahead and do that staff review that we normally do once a year, and making one change this time around. Instead of just leaving that review to the people inside the police department, I'm going to invite public feedback.
And tell me about that decision, because obviously you've been doing this now on a yearly basis. That is a major change to invite the public to comment on this yearly review. How did we get here?
Well, I think it's very important to make sure that people know exactly what we do and why we do it. So its two purposes are to educate people about the policies and to make sure that they know we look at them frequently to make sure they're up to date, but also to make sure they reflect what the people we serve expect and want from us.
Absolutely. And I saw in your blog post and the press release that went out to us that you were looking at for some public commentary on the 8 can't wait suggestions, and if there's any leniency in there. So some of the things that I saw you asking of the public were things like, is it ever justified to shoot at a moving car? Or are there certain scenarios in which pressure on a neck would be permissible? Have you heard any commentary on those questions at this point, or is it still just the very beginning of this process?
So far, I've gotten just a few general comments from people who have expressed support for the Gulfport Police Department. I haven't gotten any specific comments about those questions in particular. I would love to get some feedback on that because, I looked over all of the research material that was put out with 8 Can't Wait, and there's some things in there that are a little vague and confusing. So I want to make sure I don't put out a policy that's vague and confusing. It has to be very clear on what is or is not allowed. So that's my goal.
Absolutely. And I mean, I can pull it from the blog post, but I would love to get from you, since we are obviously studying for this interview, when you say that there's some that you feel are gray area, or as you've been thinking through some policies, wondering about different scenarios that could play out. Can you tell me what are some of the suggestions that for you have some gray area that you are looking for commentary on?
Sure. As I exampled on there, one question um, is an absolute ban on chokeholds appropriate? Consider, for example, an officer might be pinned to the ground in such a way that he or she cannot access weapons. And if in that situation deadly force is authorized and they have no other option, would it not be reasonable? Or, for example, is it appropriate to ban or outright ban shooting at a moving vehicle when there's a lot of incidents reported lately where people are using vehicles as weapons to target crowds? Or is it appropriate to require a verbal warning in every instance before using deadly force? Might there be circumstances where doing so could endanger the police officers or prompt somebody to fire a gun where they weren't ready to do that beforehand? So these things need to be looked at very closely, and I really want to get opinions from people who live in and work in and visit Gulfport to know what they think on these options.
And that's, I think, really interesting that you're opening it up to the public. And one of the things that we've seen over the course of these protests and the movement that's kind of been started after George Floyd's death is this desire of individuals to know more about the police department or to have more of an active role. when you look at community policing and relationships with the community and police departments, how would you rate Gulfport PD's relationship with the community? What are the strengths and where are the areas that you still need to improve?
Well, our community constantly reminds us how much they like us, and I hear that all the time. One of the things that we do is a Citizens Police Academy, at least once a year, oftentimes twice a year. We've got hundreds of alumni from that. We have a waiting list of people who want to attend, and those folks understand what we do because they go through a 11-week program on the ins and outs of police work in our town, and then they go out and advocate for us because they know what it's like. They've seen, so to speak, the day-to-day from our shoes, and that helps tremendously. Where can we improve? I think we can improve our relationship with, there's a lot of folks who come to Gulfport who don't live in Gulfport, and we don't really have much of an option to communicate with them except when they're here. And that's something I would like to work on. A big example are folks who go to school here. There's a lot of folks who go to school in Gulfport who don't live in Gulfport. So we have officers assigned to those schools. I want to increase the interaction, the positive interaction between the officers and those students. They're not just there for the students' safety. They need to be making sure that those students understand the value of a positive police relationship.
Absolutely. Can I get an update on the body cams? I know you guys are a smaller force. We haven't, I think there was some reporting with our station in the past. So where are you currently on body cams? Do all officers who are on duty have them? And what are the policies around when they are on and the ability of an officer to turn them off?
We are moving towards 100% deployment. We are not there yet because it's expensive. We started using body cameras about 10 years ago. When we first started it, it was optional, completely optional for the officers to use them. If they had one in their possession, then they're required to activate the camera to record any stops, detentions, or arrests if time and circumstances permit. Obviously, if something happens in the heat of the moment and they don't have the time to reach up and switch the camera on, I won't fault them for that. But the new cameras that we are buying are synced to the cameras in the patrol cars. So as we upgrade the patrol cars and put the camera systems in the cars, then body cameras will come with them. So eventually everyone will have one.
Okay, so at this point, how many body cams, like what is the percentage of officers that have body cameras?
It's about half of them right now, half of the patrol officers.
And if a patrol officer has one, then they have time, restraints aside. If an officer has one and responds to a call that results in any of the things you just listed, they have to turn it on?
Yes, and of course there are some exceptions. For example, inside a medical facility, inside a person's residence, those sort of things. Then there may be some questions they have to ask before they start the recording. But yes, for the most part, any stop, detention, or arrest.
Got it. And so as you upgrade, the plan is to have a body camera on every officer?
Yes.
Okay.
That's the idea.
To jump back to the review of force, and then the 8 can't wait. In your blog post, you mentioned that there's already many of those suggestions are already in your policies. So what were some of the things that stood out for you, suggestions for the 8 can't wait that Gulfport already has?
Well, it's in policy now, but not in the same language. And that's why I'm trying to, I would like to be able to make it clear to the public. I think it's already clear to the officers exactly what they're allowed to do, because the policy as it stands now requires that you use only that force which is reasonably necessary to accomplish the goal. And that policy would preclude, for example, using what is commonly seen as a chokehold in almost every case, but it doesn't specifically say that. So what I'm trying to get to is, can we make it very clear to the public, to someone who just asked for a copy of our policy and looks at it, they would currently think we don't prohibit it, even though legally speaking and technically speaking, given the language in our current policy, we do. I'm just trying to make it more clear for anyone who sees the policy what the officers are and are not allowed to do.
Got it. So to be clear on that point then, where does Gulfport stand when it comes to chokeholds?
Uh, if deadly force would be warranted and you don't have any other option, then it would be allowed.
Okay. And just to get back to this, because obviously it's the reason why we're sitting down this afternoon, I wanted to get, again, the decision to bring in the public when it came to your review of your policies on force. We're at a very interesting time in America. That's clear to everyone, really.
Oh, yeah.
So why this decision to open up your review of policy to the community? What are you hoping to achieve by doing that?
Just like I said earlier, transparency. I want the public to know what we do and why we do it, number one. And number two, I want for our end result, our policy to be a reflection of what our community expects of us.
And at this point, there has been no policy suggestions or comment, like have there been any comments from the public to make any adjustments or anything like that? Or is it still too soon? You haven't seen anything yet?
Well, not specifically. I mean, I haven't been checking the messages all day long, so I can get back to you tomorrow morning, let you know if anything has come in since then. But so far, I haven't got anything specific yet.
Okay, great.